It's ReeferMEDness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
So, we're back. We've got a really, really interesting guy to get to, but I want to tell you a quick story first because it's actually a lead into this one nicely. So, like it seems I'm doing all the time now, I was taking a cannabis course, so, Zoom everything. So, Humber River Hospital from Toronto-ish area, and through Spectrum Therapeutics, which is the medical side of Canopy Growth, the Tweed store. There is their medical end. Put this thing on, and 3 hours, 3 hours each, 2 weekends, total 6 hours, and I might actually get some CUs for this. So that's why I was. The first half was really good. Female doc who actually treats patients with cannabis. So, she went over her endocannabinoid system and this, that, and that. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed her. Second half, now, I'm not saying he was a bad person, but the second half was a guy from CAMH. So for those of you who've never heard of it, CAMH is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. So, for example, when I took my Suboxone and Methadone course a year or two ago, that's who puts that on. So not all of what they do, but a lot of what they do is getting people with substance use disorder off that substance. And which is fine, laudable, good. But, he had like an hour and a half to talk about cannabis. And he wasn't a fan. Which is fine, it's good. We should hear about people who are not fans, but he said things like, and might actually be true, but it's just kind of, basically the more you use cannabis, the more likely you are to have a cannabis use disorder. Okay, that's probably true. Even if you're using it medicinally, okay, probably. Like if I've never used cannabis, I guess I'm not going to get a cannabis use disorder, so maybe just a pedantic thing. But they went. He even said at the end, he said, I don't want to sound completely negative about cannabis, but basically his whole hour and a half was completely negative about cannabis. And it made me think, maybe our medical professions, one of the reasons they're so anti-cannabis, because this came up a lot, was, now I'm starting to sound like you a little bit, but maybe they're feeling guilty about how badly the opioid crisis went. They overprescribed. I'm part of the problem. We overused opioids. Now we have a bunch of people addicted to opioids, and that's causing lots of problems. It's almost like they're feeling guilty for that, and now we're going too hard on cannabis, and at least that was my impression. But yeah, I had an hour and a half of why cannabis is bad from a doc who treats cannabis use disorder. So that, I think, leads not too badly into the person we're going to talk to today.
Well, yes, it does, but you've left that wide open for me to respond to.
Sure.
Well, you sound like I did in our last episode with when I started ranting about taking a controlled substance course. Part of working in the North is that every 3 years I have to take a controlled substance course, and how frustrating it is that cannabis is so low on the priority list and seen as a problem. So I'm thinking that the health professions, our professional bodies, haven't caught up yet, is the way I'm looking at it. And you stole my thunder, because that was going to be part of my wrap-up on looking at this story.
Sorry, man.
That's okay. It just tells me that we're both on the same page here. Paul, okay, let's get into Paul here. Paul's a nurse.
So friend of the show, Paul.
A friend of the show, Paul. And the thing about Paul is that I titled this episode, One Less Nurse.
Okay.
Right? Essentially, we have one less nurse in the profession because of his relationship with cannabis.
Which is fantastic in the era of COVID and everything else.
Well, and again, I didn't want to get to the wrap-up. This is
Sorry.
No, Paul's an early supporter of our program. It's probably probably right to say that he introduced us to many of the people in the provincial green culture, the cannabis culture. We met a lot of people in Winnipeg through our friendship with Paul. He is heard on season 2, episode 8, the basement tapes, where I went into the basement and saw how he grows his medicine. You know, he was also going to help us and support us with our pandemically canceled cannabis dinner. He was gifting us product to help us with that. So it's not without, I guess, declaring that he's a friend of this program. We're a friend of his. But having said that, declaring that, this is a story I've wanted to tell for about 2 years, because I've known the story. I've been following Paul. Paul and I talking with each other, so I've known where he's gone. And we're going to hear a story that I can't help but think that the profession has lost a member. You know, so let's get his story out, and then we'll jump to our conclusions at the end.
All right, let's go hear from Paul.
Paul, why don't we just start there? You were a registered nurse, and you're no longer. Can you give me a short history of how long you were nursing? When did you start? Where did you go to school? What was your specialty?
Certainly. So real quick backstory, just prior to nursing, lived a pretty normal life, good parenting, good family. However, found myself struggling with some mental health issues, early teenager years. And it progressed into a full-blown addiction, which eventually left me homeless and without any support networks, and really just struggling at life by the age of 19 years old. And then just to bridge the story from that to nursing, I ended up getting my life together, found cannabis, and that kind of helped me get back to a level-headed state where I could progress in life. Eventually get a university degree, nursing degree, and meet a family and turn my life around. But the story of nursing started in 2006. I decided after a period of just working other jobs that it was time to get serious. Life had kind of turned around, and I felt like I was ready to embark on a new journey in life. And nursing just was always a good fit for me because my prior experience had always been looking after people. So 2006, I decided to enroll. I got into the nursing program, and I really enjoyed it. It was very challenging. I went back again as a mature student with a little bit of a different outlook, but I made it through, and did very well, and ended up did kind of so well that in my practicum, I was asked to kind of finish early because I was working on a palliative care unit, and it was just a perfect fit for me. And I kind of found my niche in nursing, and with the permission of the palliative care team, the facility, and the university, we kind of ended the practicum as fast as I could, doing extra hours, and secured a full-time job right out of my practicum in the month of August still, while school was still kind of technically going on. So I was very lucky and very blessed to find my spot in nursing, and I really, really, really enjoyed palliative care. So that was what kind of got me into nursing, struggling early on in life, refining myself, and then getting into nursing and returning that by looking after other people. And so I did nursing from 2010. I graduated in August, secured a job immediately on palliative care. And I worked in palliative care for a short period of time, full time, left for a float gig that saw me float around the hospital for about half a year. And then I was lucky enough to return palliative care for the remaining 9 years as a 0.5, 0.6 with some shift pickups. So that was my nursing career, and that's where I found myself as a nurse on palliative care.
Okay, so just backtracking a little bit. So before you were a nurse, you had, I guess it's fair to say you had addiction issues?
Yes, I definitely had addiction issues, co-occurring disorder issues of really bad mental health, depression and anxiety that manifests into depression and vice versa. And it was debilitating at times, but I just always kind of pushed through. And then, like I said, just medicated with things we probably shouldn't medicate with, but found some relief in that. But eventually, like any addiction, it takes over and it makes life completely unmanageable on top of the mental health issues.
Right. So without going too quickly into the story, but before you got into nursing, did you have any issues with the law or with legal issues before nursing?
Not at all. Very, 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 very normal, plain life. No
Okay.
issues with the law. Just a very quiet kid that just never felt right.
Nursing's an infamous profession for weeding out its young. So as a student, as an applicant, did you have to declare any health issues, mental health issues as an
No,
applicant? No. And
everything.
go ahead.
No, like I said, idle time was always bad for me. So when I had no goals or no direction in life, like most, I kind of got myself in trouble.
Okay.
And I found that nursing and the ability to put that energy into caring for other people was what really helped me stay focused. And I always found, like I said, when I was goal orientated, like most of us, and had things that I was working for, there was never even a feeling of that mental health in my life. Things were very, very good. Again, with the combination of having goals, but also most importantly, finding something that worked for me to alleviate these feelings I could never alleviate with any other method of therapy. Now, I tried everything. So before people will question, I mean, I tried multiple rounds of medications, pharmacology, and all sorts of other interventions, therapy, and it just never brought me comfort or the ability to live happy. It just kind of put a Band-Aid on the mental health issues, but I still felt terrible. And the medication had some side effects, of course, that we all know of that just didn't work for me, especially being in an acute setting of nursing where I needed to be very sharp and alert. I just found that any type of medication did not work with me and my profession, where I could, again, I said, found cannabis, and I would use cannabis on my off time. And that's where I found that relief, and like, it was a relief I had never felt before. And so it was something I was very, very happy about because I got my life back, and obviously felt very strongly about in its therapeutic effects.
So to be clear, the medications you're talking about are prescription medications you got from your family doctor, and those were not working for you. So you found cannabis as your medicine.
Right. And I mean, we tried everything. I mean, I'm a recovered addict, or was at the time, and I was getting prescribed benzos and things that just no person who has a history of addiction should really be prescribed or really wants to get into. If there's something that was much less harmful and less addicting, which cannabis was for me, that worked so much better.
Interesting, though, people who are on those type of drugs normally do work. Like they'll take their prescriptions.
Well, they work for a short period of time, right? Okay. And that's how I always found them. So you have to load up for 6 weeks, get used to the medication dosage, find what works for you. And you get a little bit of normalcy for a while and some benefits. But my response was always very short-lived. So, and I would suffer from really the worst side effects. So, weight gain was huge for me. I used to be able to sleep so well. Whenever I was on the medications, my sleep habits would get messed up, so I couldn't sleep anymore. There was all sorts of functions that did not work for me. I just kind of walked around in a daze all day from having this continue adjustments or switching medications, going on something for a while, and then having to stop.
So walk me through the process when you discovered that cannabis was actually helping you more than the prescriptions. Walk me through that process. How did you discover that? And how did you deal with it with your doctors?
Well, like I said, Manitoba, as we know, unfortunately, is quite a restrictive province when it comes to cannabis, and they have a historical, stereotypical approach about cannabis, and it's still here today, as you can tell. We're one of the only few provinces that we can't grow, so we still have quite a negative stereotype of cannabis use here in Manitoba. Now, imagine in Prohibition times, which was only a few years ago, Manitoba was probably one of the most restrictive provinces in Canada regarding cannabis and cannabis use and cannabis law and cannabis policy and reform. So to find a doctor in Manitoba to get a prescription you couldn't. It was impossible. And in fact, any of the ones that we had who were getting prescriptions under the MAR program, from what I understand, some were actually being held up by the College of Physicians. There was a lot of negative stereotypes of anyone working with cannabis in our city and in our province. So you could not find anyone here in Manitoba to get a prescription. Now, as a nurse, I went through nursing, and I really enjoyed nursing law and nursing ethics. And I knew after exhausting all my resources in Manitoba that even my family doctor wouldn't even give me a referral for a cannabis prescription or to a cannabis doctor. But your only options in Manitoba prior to cannabis legalization was you had to, on your own dime, go to BC, find a doctor in BC who would prescribe to you. This would be a doctor that has no idea of your past history and unfortunately probably doesn't care, just because, it's a quick visit and there's one reason why you're there, and that's to get your cannabis license. So you put your own dime, you have to travel there probably for 5 or 6 days for a week, stay there on your own dime, travel expense, and then see a doctor who had no idea who you were, did a quick review of your chart, and then for about $1,000 or $300, you could get a script for your medical script. And as a nurse for me in Manitoba, who, again, I really enjoyed nursing law, nursing ethics, and certain nurses that push the boundaries, like the nurses that started Insight and all these sort of nurses that kind of pushed and advocated for things that were wrong. I just, in hindsight and in good faith, I just ethically couldn't leave province to go see a doctor that didn't know me. So I took the risk, unfortunately, and in hindsight, maybe it wasn't a good idea, but it definitely opened many doors for me to just grow my cannabis illegally. And I had a very small garden in my house, and we did this for the better part of a decade without any issues. So I knew that there was no real harm in a small medical garden. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the paperwork to get it done in my own province, and like I just stated, it just seemed unethical for me to leave province to get something.
And before you jump, because I know where the story's going, I just want to clarify one more thing. So you discovered cannabis as your own medicine. You were on the benzos. You're on prescriptions. And if I remember correctly, you told me the doctor at the time was your family doctor who had known you for decades. He knew your history. So all of a sudden, Paul comes into his office and you do your review, and you're not taking his prescriptions. How did you enter the conversation with him that you're using cannabis?
Well, what happened was I hadn't seen my doctor for a while because life had been so good. But what had happened was I myself realized that the prescriptions and the attempts to prescribe me pharmacology interventions weren't working. So what most patients do, if something's not working, they don't take it. So I didn't take it. But in that process, I had met a gardener in my neighborhood in Wolseley. And this guy introduced me to certain types of cannabis plants, specifically sativa plants that I'd never seen before, didn't know the difference really, but he introduced me to some different types of cannabinoid profiles that weren't common or things I had never really tried before. That's where this started. So I started using medicine that he would grow, and he eventually taught me how to do it on my own, but these unique profiles that seemed to work so well for my anxiety and depression. So sativa dominant types of plants that gave me energy, helped me focus, and did all these things that worked for me. So I started using that and less and less and less of the other medications, and started realizing that long-term and consistently, I felt better. There was no denying it. I felt better. People around me noticed, man, what a change. You're happier. You're brighter. You're not so foggy. So I didn't see my doctor for a long period of time. And suddenly the raid happened, and I wanted to follow all rules and laws, especially now, knowing that I was going to have a criminal fight ahead of me and a professional fight ahead of me. So I stopped using cannabis, went to the office and said, look, I have been using cannabis for a long period of time, not using the medicine that we had tried to prescribe to help. And I'm now in a position where I have been raided and I want to follow the law as closely as I can. Can you help me get a prescription for cannabis, because it's working for me and has been for a long period of time now since I last saw you? We're talking years. And I was told, and I don't blame my doctor because her experience is very minimal with cannabis, but she pretty much refused outright. And it took my mother, who knows her just longer than I have, to actually come and fight for a referral. And now at this time, it was right on the verge of legalization, and it was happening here where we finally had a clinic in Manitoba. It was an extension from a Vancouver outfit that now had an office in Manitoba that would prescribe licenses in Manitoba. So I now had this ability to not leave province, get someone in my own province to provide me medical care and prescription. And that was kind of what set that motion rolling. However, she refused to give me the prescription or the referral. by law, I think most doctors have to give a referral. It's not any harm done to them, no harm done to me. It's just a simple referral to someone who knows more and specializes in a topic that the patient is looking for.
Fundamental family medicine, right?
It's right. And I had to bring my mom.
Yeah.
My mom came in, badgered her a little bit and said, look, we were both in tears. There's a bit of a crossroads here. We need medical help. My son needs medical help. Can you give the referral? So I finally got the referral. And that was when I got my license finally to grow cannabis. But in the process of all this, I had reported already to the college that I'd been raided and I'd been arrested. And that sent forth that whole future fight that was going to happen. And then you have to realize too, I had the criminal charges that were now pending and looming. So I had no option but to get my license, and I was finally able to get it correctly here with, proper methods to get in Manitoba. So that changed everything.
Right. So,
but it didn't.
Yeah, I know. We're going to, this is the story. We're now where we want to be. But again, I have to assume our listeners aren't up to snuff. You got raided. You had said earlier in the conversation, you were growing your own medicine in your basement. You had a small garden, and we discussed your garden in the episode Homegrown. People can go back to our basement. Sorry, the song was Homegrown in the basement. So people can go back to that. So you are a registered nurse. You've got your medicine garden in the basement. You are not a registered grower.
Nope.
And obviously you're not in Wolseley anymore. You've moved neighborhoods.
Right. So marrying my wife, finishing my degree, we found a house in Windsor Park. We moved there, and, we set up very quietly in the basement and followed every rule we could. Yeah. So proper ventilation, odor control, everything we could do to just keep this big, dark secret that two professionals had, especially this nurse. I was a nurse and I was growing cannabis. I knew what I was doing, but I knew as a nurse that, and as a cannabis advocate, that there was no harm being done. And it was actually benefiting me more than any harm could be caused to society.
Yeah. So I guess obviously new neighbors, somebody drops the dime, or I guess it'd be a loony now.
Well, we used to medicate outside, and we had a neighbor that originally had no problem with it. And then suddenly there was new neighbors that were brought into the side duplex, and they had a real issue with the odor of cannabis. Now it was always the smell of cannabis smoking in the backyard. So we tried to stop. We would wait till we would see no neighbors outside, or we would go use the garage, but it just escalated to the point where there was constant interaction or phone calls to the police, and the police have to follow up on numerous phone calls, and they did. And they were here, and I guess they alerted to the fact that, it does kind of smell like cannabis. And that brought us into the 2-week investigation and the subsequent raid.
So here we are, Paul. You've been raided. You're a registered nurse. You're a palliative nurse, a caring person. You're using medication. Take us through the next steps.
Well, this is the breakdown. So real quick, July 2010, graduated nursing. July 2010, became a full-time nurse, palliative care. September 14th, raided.
2010?
2016. So 6 years into nursing, raided. 2016, September. September 15th, like any professional nurse is obligated, you are obligated to disclose to the college nurses any type of issue that you may have with nursing, any error in conduct, any misconduct, any potential misconduct. It is my professional duty as a nurse to disclose this to my governing body. And that's what I did the following day. And now you have to understand, when a raid happens, you have guns in your face, you come home to a house that the government is trying to take from you, and people are trying to take from you and seize. You have a house that is torn apart, destroyed. You don't know where your cats are because doors are kicked in. It's literally the biggest nightmare you've ever seen in your life. You have a family home, kids, pets, everything is just destroyed. So you are in such a state of distress. And now I'm not using cannabis because I'm trying to be a law-abiding citizen. So worst days of my life, it was like being teleported back into the midst of the worst addiction days of my life. Chaos. So anyways, September 15th, I do my due diligence. I send an email to the college disciplinary committee saying, I regret to inform you, I have just been arrested for growing cannabis. I, definitely will be looking at a court case, potential jail, potential discipline from the province. And I just want to let you know that this is what happened. These are the charges. There was 4 charges. I just need you to know, where do we go from here? So that was September 15th, 2016. October 12th, I guess the college had not been able to find the email, or the email got misplaced, but it was almost a month period that they found the correspondence. And then October 18th, they reviewed everything, the disclosure that I put forth with the disciplinary committee, and it was passed to the disciplinary committee at this point. So October 20th, I received my first letter from the college saying, whoa, we just found out that you were arrested. We reviewed everything. We definitely need to hear more about this. We are going to put this forth to the disciplinary committee, and we want to have a hearing, one of many hearings. So the October 27th was the first hearing we had with the college. So it is highly recommended, and by everybody, that you have legal representation. So you definitely want to go there with legal representation. So you get legal representation, lawyer. MNU, our union, supplies a list of lawyers. So you go there with your lawyer, and we sat there, and it's a very intimidating situation. You are in a very, very large boardroom, and you are at the foot of the table, surrounded by sometimes 12 disciplinary members, college professionals, directors, the whole rigmarole. And you are there to plead your case, give more information, and answer questions. So we sat there, and that was the very first introduction and the very first disciplinary meeting about the cannabis raid. So in that meeting, I divulged to them, they wanted to know a few things. It was brought forward that my use was medical, that I have longstanding depression, anxiety. That's what I use cannabis for. I also said the reason why, I could never grow legally, was we weren't able to get the prescription here. I explained my point of not leaving province and paying out of pocket and doing this unethical prescription seeking out of province. I put that forth as to why I took the risk. And essentially, they hear you out, and then they formulate some questions and come back and either come up with some sort of not undertaking, but things you need to do to show them that you are not a risk to the profession or to the safety of the public, because that is the college's job, is to protect the public. Very important job. So it was in this meeting that I was now told that I would have to have some standard things that the college does when anyone is brought forth with any type of drug use issues or any type of addiction issues. Mine was drug use from their perspective, because I was using cannabis illegally, regardless how you break it down. It was illegal to the college what I was doing. Fair enough. So we had our hearing, and the outcome of that was I took the stance. Now, very interesting. If you go look back at one prior case, to the public, you can go to the college's website, type in disciplinary hearings outcomes, and you'll see a list of all the CRNM hearings that have happened over the years. I think it goes back 12 years. There is one particular case that is a mirror case of ours, mirrored image, where there is a new grad who just graduated, and he was arrested for a cannabis raid, only he had no prior work experience and had no full position with a nursing entity or facility yet. And because he took the stance of apologizing and condemning his behavior, telling the college he would never use cannabis again for his mental health, that he would now exhaust every pharmacological, every conventional method that the college approved of to deal with his mental health, he was let go with pretty much a slap on the wrist. Okay. So when I went in, I took the different approach, because that was not my approach, and I couldn't lie. So I told them I was not going to stop using cannabis medically because it worked. I was going to seek out my license. And when I got my license is when I would continue using cannabis legally. And so that was the first thing we did, is we got our license and we got everything put in place. But they wanted me to now perform a fitness apparatus exam. Now that is very common with any type of drug issue with a nurse. One of the first tools they use, and it's a great tool, is it's a fitness apparatus exam. And this is a tool that looks cognitively, physically at the nurse's ability to conduct themselves professionally and safely as a nurse. So generally how this works is the college has a group of doctors that they use. These are usually psychologists, addiction professionals, and so forth. Mine was the addiction specialist, a really prominent addiction specialist in Winnipeg. My fitness apparatus exam was to be with her. So we left that meeting with the idea that I have to have this fitness apparatus exam. This will prove if I'm a safe nurse to work, and we can come back at a later time and discuss the results. So I went on my way. I went to this doctor's meeting. I have to also understand that this is all paid out of member pocket. So the first hearing in total with lawyer fees was about $2,000. This is for about 30 minutes of a hearing. Plus I now am being charged about $2,000 for a fitness apparatus exam, which, hey, if it allows me the ability to continue working as a nurse, I will pay whatever. So we paid it. We went and saw this doctor. It's a big day. You go to the Health Science Center. It's one of our biggest hospitals in the city. You go there, you're nervous as hell because here you are. It's kind of like a flashback of being an addict again. You walk into this giant hospital. It's a zoo. You have no idea where to go. And I remember candidly asking a colleague, a doctor, just someone that I could relate to because I'm a nurse. I see a guy in scrubs, the doctor. So I go ask the doctor, can you help me find this? And he goes, oh, good luck, buddy. I really hope things work out for you. It's right over there. So it just kind of shows you already the stereotype, the stigma I was feeling about being there. So, but whatever, I went and got my fitness apparatus exam. So the fitness apparatus exam was me sitting with a doctor, and she just asked me about my, like any type of history assessment that nurses do every day, doctors do. It's just figuring out my life, what brought me here, my needs, and do I have a problem with cannabis? Is it medical? And can I function in society as someone who uses cannabis? And at home and on the job, everywhere. It's pretty much assessment to see where I'm at in life and if I'm functioning and if I am able to function safely. And that's what it is. So it was about a 40-minute session, about an hour. We went through everything, full physical history, no physical assessment, but physical history of everything, drug use, family life, job performance. Now you have to understand, when I went there, I mean, I went loaded. I had support letters from my nursing facility, my nursing manager, my CNO. I had a lot of information, job performance evaluations, all these things that, I mean, there was no issue with work. There never has been. I would say even the opposite. There's been accolades and a really strong, productive nursing career. So she was presented all this data in a very unbiased fashion, and leaving there, she wanted to speak to my manager, which made sense because it's my manager at work. She sees me work on a daily basis, but also wanted to speak to my family to see what my home life was. Now, everything she did to follow up just kind of reiterated that everything I said, all the positive feedback and all the positive living and the huge change in my life that went positive, everything was good. Everything was good. Now, this is where things turned. Up to this point, I figured that, you know, things are going to work out. There's going to be some common sense here. We're going to do what we have to do. I'm going to go on, continue nursing, and I can deal with my criminal matters like someone should deal with. The doctor, after receiving positive information, positive data, subjective and objective from myself and colleague, manager, wife, 180'd the entire fitness apparatus exam and turned it around and said that she felt that I had a co-occurring disorder of mental health issues and a severe cannabis addiction that would require a 6-month stay at the Cody program at Health Science Center under her care. This would be the only way potentially that I could get back to a state of good mental health and good work performance and life performance where I could return potentially to nursing.
To lock you away for 6 months.
6 months. Now, I'm going to stress again, fitness practice exams, and these are very, very beneficial when there is an issue with performance, an issue with drugs. And I understand that the nursing college just really wanted to determine if there was. But with all the data presented, all of it, and there was a lot of data, like there was multiple people, multiple data presented to her. There was even a cannabis prescription that I had just received. Everything was presented for medical use, and she literally made it appear that I was a complete disaster.
Well, this is what I'm finding interesting, is that you are a functioning nurse that's getting accolades from your colleagues, patients, and again, I know some of the story here, but she's turned it around. Somebody that gets that kind of a prescription of 6 months is usually someone that's off the rails and living rough and has completely blown up and destroyed. So they need to be brought back to daily living and a whole bit. How did she justify that in the board? How did that get?
Well, I mean, and quick point, I mean, I have lived a life of chaos when I was a teenager, 19, 20. Like, I have seen chaos. I know what it looks like and what it is.
Sure.
There was no evidence of chaos at all. There was quite the opposite. It was a Cinderella story of turning a life around and really thriving in a profession and in life in general.
So she would have had to have presented that to the board with you present, right?
We'll get there. Yes.
Okay.
so after the results came in, I mean, the issue with her is, I understand her perspective in her job is she's an addiction specialist, and that's her job. But there was absolutely no data to support her decision. This was just a real odd decision, an odd report that there was just no basis to it. There was nothing that could support it at all. I've had colleagues, professionals, multiple people, psychs read, everyone who's read it has kind of just said, why did she come to this kind of conclusion? And all I can say was the definitive change in that meeting from positive to negative was she asked me, would you quit cannabis use for your professional job? And I knew that if I quit cannabis and went back to what didn't work, all this Cinderella story and everything that I had would slowly fall away, because that's what happened.
But you had a prescription at that point. How dare her ask you that question? Would she have asked somebody who was on a benzo or an antipsychotic med the same question? I don't think she would have.
I mean, she might have, but it was a quick discredit to the effects of cannabis. It was a very common addiction specialists kind of point of view of cannabis use. Not saying it's wrong. It's just that's their exposure, as they see a lot of harm done by drugs. And I get that point. But when you are a professional dealing with another professional and you're being provided data that is clear and concise, how dare you come to a conclusion like that in the future has one purpose, and that's to condemn my use and to support the clear negative view that the college had at the time of cannabis use and professionalism. It didn't exist. It couldn't coexist. Cannabis and professionals.
But what bothers me about this is that at this time, like, you've already owned up to the fact that you made a mistake and you did something out of your own personal morals that you thought was right. You got caught. I'll pay the price. But now you're sitting in front of professional people with a prescription for a medicine, and a psychologist, a PhD is questioning a physician for giving you that prescription. So she's attacking you, but you're sitting there with another professional saying that I have a medicine here and you're telling me to go off I find that incredulous, man.
It even went one further. So this report was to be sent to the college naturally, but I needed a copy, right? So she knew about my family doctor, and she knew in the interview that my family doctor was kind of on the fence about cannabis use, but my mom had kind of been there to help me. So she figured she would go one step further. And we actually had a college of physician case over this and won. But she figured, just to stick it a little bit farther on me, she would send this result to my doctor to review. Now, you got to understand, the college and the physician doing a fitness practice exam is an independent assessment that is not a part of my medical record. It is not. This is a document that was requested and completed by another entity, and has no place in my medical file. But she knew that if she faxed it to my doctor for a pickup spot where I could pick it up conveniently, that my doctor would review it and it would get put in my file. So to this day, we are still fighting to get this removed from my medical file for my current family GP because she doesn't want to remove it. The doctor who initially had sent it got reprimanded for it and had to change her practice and her FIA signage sheet on releasing information. So there was a bunch of adjustments made, but just to show you today, it is still in my medical file. The college refuses to do any type of intervention to have it removed. The doctor won't have it removed. The College of Physicians are telling me legal action is the only outcome that I could possibly look at this point, but I don't want to do that. So we're working with my doctor still trying to have this removed. That's a side story. So she sent it there just as one last little stick. But anyways, what happened after I got the results back, I finally was able to get them. And I mean, I remember the clearest day. I was kind of like, this woman received all this professional received all this benefiting information about cannabis working for me. It can't be bad. The college is going to learn this time that, hey, this works for him. But I remember reading that college, that fitness practice exam, and I turned white because I could not believe what she wrote about me and how it was so opposite of what she read. But anyways, we had a hearing because once that's done, they now had this tool, this beautiful tool that they had that was a fictitious report that they could now use in the upcoming disciplinary hearing to discipline me because they have this shiny report that a professional with all sorts of designations behind her name and respected wrote. So next hearing we had was, okay, so January 27th, we met again after the fitness practice exam came in. I already had my prescription for 7 grams a day. So they were also kind of upset about the prescription. So they went one above, and part of the fitness practice exam request, there was also 2 requests that were put in. I had to provide my prescription, which was fine. It's a cannabis prescription, but they wanted to make it difficult. So they also wanted me to have the doctor, because they didn't have a lot of faith in the cannabis doctors. I mean, just that's kind of what they do is they prescribe cannabis. They're the experts, but they don't have a lot of faith in those doctors or physicians. I had to present the assessment tools that were used to determine my cannabis usage and prescription. And I had to provide them with all this post-assessment, pre-assessment health history. So it was very, very, very overreaching again. But we met January 27th, to which they imposed conditions on my practice based on this fictitious, ridiculous fitness practice exam where I could no longer increase or change my EFT. I couldn't pick up shifts. And again, I had to provide all this information to them now about how I got my prescription, how it was provided, how it was assessed that I deserved it. And that was kind of the end for us because my lawyer at the time, again, lawyers involved, lots of money at these hearings. We had enough. He knew enough. He saw the information. He saw all the data I presented, work evaluations, objective data from bosses, unit managers, CNOs, family members. He had enough. And he said, this is absurd. He said, they are trying to bury you. So we asked for an appeal hearing, to which, thank the nursing gods, we got. We had a nursing appeal hearing on February 28th, and we won. We won. And the outcome of that meeting was that they would now kind of dismiss the current fitness practice exam, but I had to get another one, which we were like, let's get another one. Yes. We looked for 3 months. We couldn't find a fitness practice exam. Finally, we found a new person who gave us a fitness practice exam. And what do you think the outcome of that fitness practice exam was? A 180. It was perfect. This was a real fitness practice exam where I was asked to come medicated. I went medicated. Even though I would never be medicated at work, they wanted me to see how I functioned under the influence of cannabis. I went there. We did fine motor, gross motor skills. We did dosage calculations. We did real fitness to practice examinations to see what I worked like and worked as a nurse who might consume cannabis on off hours. And now to prescription. And it was a 180. I nailed and passed everything with flying colors. The presenters and the people who were doing the test were kind of dumbfounded as well, because they got to see the prior document. And it was exactly how the first one should have went. It was a very honest, clear picture of a man who happens to be a nurse that finds medical relief for his mental health from cannabis. And that was our saving grace. We were able to go back with that. And in the appeal hearing after that, we were allowed to now lift the restrictions. So I could now have an increase in EFT. I could pick up shifts again, because the appeal board could find no evidence to support the original fitness practice exam, and found that the new one, obviously was in such contrast that something wasn't right. And that's kind of where things left off. And I was okay and left alone for a good year and a half while we waited for the criminal case, because now we had proved without a doubt that this nurse could have a medical cannabis license, partake on his days off like he would, and still come to work on his days and function, not only function, but function well as a nurse. So we were able to defend and win that section, but they like to fight. And so it quickly now became about professional conduct, misconduct, about being arrested. So that was put aside, but now we had to wait for the outcome of the courts, and there would be reprimandation, and there would also be cases coming forward to deal with the professional misconduct. So there was a lot still coming, but there was a little bit of a lull for about a year. And then it picked up again once the case was finished. And that's kind of where we get to the point of how I exited from nursing. And that's another story we can get into real quick.
Let's do it. What?
So we had that kind of lull where you kind of forget about things. Life goes back to normal, because you have to understand, working in such an acute nursing field of palliative care, going through this case thing, criminal case thing, and fighting with the college. Life was very stressful.
I imagine.
And I can't thank the cannabis gods enough for giving me a script and allowing me to maintain my sanity. Because I will say, if it wasn't for medical cannabis, I don't know what I would have done in that period of time. It saved my life. It kept me going. And so go ahead.
So what happens after the
so we have a lull. We have a lull in this case. The court case picks up, because that's another 3-4 year process of delays. And we're coming to the final court case. We have the final court case. It's the day of court. I'm in the court with my partner. My lawyer's there. No one else is in the court. However, behind me, there's one person in court, one person in the entire room. You get your case. It's all dealt with. You have your time in court. You get your sentence. And then by chance, someone in my immediate group just kind of asks, "Who are you?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm with the College of Nurses." So the only person in the courtroom that day was a College of Nurse representative. And so after that, she went back to her job and obviously divulged what the outcome was. But from the start of this entire process, I have been so transparent and so open to dealing with the college. The same day leaving court, left a message saying, "Hey, I got all my charges dismissed except for one. It's a illegal cannabis grow. I have 1 year of house arrest, 6 months absolute, meaning I can't leave my house for 6 months other than for work and appointments. And the other 6 months, I'm allowed a curfew. I have nothing else holding me in. Community service hours, that is it. It's over. I'm done. I'm going to pay my dues, and I want to move on, because this has been 4 years of hell." Within a week of getting the decision, the college wanted to have a meeting. We had our first hearing about the professional misconduct, because that's what this was about now moving forward. And they do what they normally do, is they put forward an undertaking. And the undertaking is essentially an agreement that the college makes with the nurse, in ensuring that the nurse is taking measures to adhere to college requests. And they can be anything from counseling, more training, drug monitoring, anything like this. And so the province of Manitoba gave me my sentence. And in any sentence, anyone who is sentenced, doesn't matter if you are for car theft, violence, drugs, part of your measure sentence is you are to abstain from alcohol, like just straight having a beer, and any type of illegal drugs, not including prescriptions. So I could smoke cannabis. I don't drink. I don't do any other illegal drugs. So this was no problem. But this was the only little subset that kind of the college focused on. So when they wrote an undertaking for me, this is what they wanted me to do. Now you have to understand, I have just had 4 years of fighting with this college and the province. I've spent $18,000, $20,000 fighting the college, having fitness practice exams, everything out of my pocket, hearing after hearing, lawyer fee after lawyer fee. And now moving forward, they wanted me, part of my undertaking was they didn't feel that the province, the criminal courts of Canada, had done enough to ensure that I was going to abstain from alcohol and drugs. So their very oppressive, in my opinion, and draconian measure, which had absolutely no relation to my case, was to enforce random hair follicle testing for the 1 year period, meaning that I had 90 minutes from phone call to test to show up and have my hair follicles tested to ensure that the public was safe and I was adhering to the non-consumption of alcohol or illegal drugs, part of the sentence. Now, I felt this was absolutely ridiculous for a few reasons. One, there was no history of drug use or performance issue at all with work. Now, generally, drug monitoring is used to monitor a person who has some performance issues and drug issues that kind of overlap at work and have caused some performance issues and issues at work. I am all for that. It is a great way to introduce someone back into a profession while monitoring and keeping everybody, all parties safe. However, in this situation, this was punitive, and this was attempt to make my life more difficult still over a year period. So we fought the undertaking, and there was other measures in the undertaking, like my parole officer had to update the college like weekly. And I'll tell you, parole officers are very busy people. They are stretched very thin. And I'll never forget asking my parole officer, who was tremendous, can you update the nursing college how I'm doing every week? And she laughed. She said, I don't have time for that. She says, they can phone me if they want updates. So you would relay that back to the college, and the college would said, we don't phone people for updates. They send them in. If they don't send them in, then you're at fault for not completing the undertaking. And then we go from there. So that was another one. They also, like I said, I know. And I tried to explain to them, like, I had 90 minutes from the phone call to get my hair follicle sample tested. I mean, I am a one family car. I have to phone my parole officer to get permission for everything I do to leave the house. It's almost unlikely to get there in 90 minutes. Like, I have to rent a cab. I'm struggling. We're paying all these legal fees. It was dumbfounding that this is what they wanted me to do for no prior performance issue at all, just because the courts, they felt, weren't monitoring me close enough to protect the public. So that went on. We argued, we appealed, and they said, okay, we'll accept your appeal, but we want urine tests. We still want you to do urine tests, same thing, random urine test. And we just couldn't do it. They wanted my manager to send weekly or monthly updates of my performance, which my manager, again, very busy unit, palliative care acute unit. No one really has time for any of this nonsense. I even said, listen, you can phone her any day you want. She's okay. She'll give you an update anytime in real time how the performance is. Not good enough. Everything had to be in writing, and this draconian drug testing, this for cannabis use. And that's what this was all about, was the fact that they had a nurse that was using cannabis, stood up to the college for that cannabis use. And here we are being, treated again unfairly, very heavy-handed. And really, at the end of the day, there was no public protection needed.
So we lose a nurse over this.
Well, and so then what happened was, it came down to the fact, and you have to also understand, in the last 2 years, I started exploring options. You just do. When you get older, you realize, hey, this could be the end. So in the time, I had already was able to have a contract as a teacher at Red River College. We built and created a cannabis course called Cannabis 101. And it was professional doctors from the community, all sorts of stakeholders that put together this unbelievable professional cannabis course. And I was teaching it, assisting teaching it, one of 4 teachers, 5 professors teaching it at the university or at the College of Red River. So there was all these things that were happening that were bringing real professionalism to cannabis, but they just didn't want to see anything. Just nope, black or white, you're in trouble. And so what happened was we butted heads. It was getting really bad. They had a lawyer. They have a college lawyer who was threatening to print my name. It's always the biggest fear in nurses. Whenever you get disciplined, they have this thing where they print your name in our monthly RN magazines. And if you go to the back, you can see all the nurses whose names have been printed. It's always a nurse who has an addiction. And it's, in my opinion, so inappropriate to share someone's mental health and addiction history. But that's what I was being threatened. I had a lawyer for the college yelling at me, threatening me to print my name. And so we had enough. I found that nursing had become so hard to do just from the simple fact of being persecuted for almost a decade of providing exceptional nursing care to Manitobans and providing exceptional palliative care to Manitobans, unbelievable bedside. And this was the thank you I got from my college of nurses. I was literally being told, pushed out of my profession if I didn't succumb to their requests, which again, were completely heavy-handed and inappropriate. And so it just came to the conclusion, my wife and I, was it worth? The only way we would ever win is if we continued to pay lots of money. There was financial threats by the college. We will continue and it'll bleed you financially. The stress it's just not worth it. So being a talented guy, kind of, able to kind of move from one thing to the other. I said we were able to get a cannabis kind of industry job, and I don't want to talk about it, but a really good cannabis industry job. And now
we'll get to that. We're gonna hit you up on that one. I was just scrolling through here on the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba website. I do find your I'm
under voluntary withdrawal.
Yeah, and that's the only notice they have on you.
Yeah. So if you go to decisions, though, you should, like I tell everybody, if you just want to have fun one day, read some of the decisions. Like there's the cannabis one that is like a mirrored case of ours, and you'll just see the different ways we went in dealing with the college and how if you apologize and don't stand up for yourself, things go away real quick. But if you really feel strongly about something and you stand up for yourself, I mean, it went to a place I still think in hindsight, I cannot believe this is how I left my profession. Never had a strike against me. I was a really strong nurse. I really enjoyed my job. I did it well. And I had to leave because I would not agree to absolutely ridiculous measures that not even the Criminal Court of Canada saw fit, but the college had this oversweeping power to push on me, and I was done. And I tell you to this day, it's not easy leaving a profession you spend 4 years, 5 years going to school for. Nursing, there's some shifts you can't even contemplate what you got done in a short period of time. It's so demanding and so acute sometimes and so hard on you. It was shocking to me to leave, but I had to leave. I could not work in a profession where I knew I wasn't appreciated by a governing college or body. And it soured the entire process for me. The absolute, the whole entire thing was soured. And left.
That's too bad. That's really
voluntary
too bad,
surrender.
Well,
so what they tended, sorry.
No, well, that's what I'm looking at. Like I'm looking at the disciplinary page right now in decisions. And when I sort of searched your name, so all those meetings you went to, all the sanctions they put you under, none of that got published except for the fact that you voluntarily surrendered your license.
How could I tell everybody I will make freely all this data to anybody that's a professional and wants to see the real story. Yeah, I don't blame them for not publishing the real case because it's ridiculous. It's an absolute kangaroo court witch hunt. It was ridiculous. The outcome should have been much different. And unfortunately, what happened was nurse got pushed out of their profession just because they stood their ground and stood on their beliefs.
So do you ever foresee, like you've got 5 years, right, as to have full-time practice hours, and you've been out of the profession now for a year?
Just over a year in July.
So theoretically, you've got 4 years if you wanted to enter the practice again. If you were given the opportunity, would you come back to nursing?
I've thought about it lots. I'm so happy what I do now. And I always said that the only way I would ever come back was if I had a written apology from the College of Nurses and maybe some of my hard-earned money that I spent fighting them back, and that will never happen. Yeah. So,
yeah. Okay. I think we're pushing Zoom here. We should end this. Pick your music, man. What would you like us to play at the end of your episode?
Little Peace Frog by the Doors.
Peace Frog, like the Doors. Good one. I like that. Good one.
Blood in the streets, blood in the streets, baby.
Yes. Okay. I'll happily play that. I went through a Doors phase in my teens. So yeah, who didn't, right?
Don't we all?
All right. Thank you for this, Paul.
Always appreciate your time, and thanks for the absolutely great podcast and all the stuff that you guys do.
See, what do you think? What do you think of that story?
Okay, the first, completely self-serving. I'm glad to hear, because, and without trying to sound like we have too much of a martyr complex, my college, now again, same with your college, my college's mandate is to protect the public from me. In my college's point of view, pharmacists are the problem, and we are to be, fought at every turn. And sometimes when you say that enough, you kind of sound a little paranoid, like, no, your college isn't really out to get you. No, sometimes it really feels like my college is out to get me. So my apologies to Paul and the seriousness of the thing. It was just nice to hear maybe another college might be out to get their profession.
Well, as I was listening to this story, and like I said, I know Paul. I've followed the progress of this story and listening to it again and trying to be objective. Is this a story of addictions, or is this a story of somebody self-medicating? Because, he explains to us about his mental health issues. He explains to us that he went through a pharmacopology, a book of meds to help him with his mental health. He basically, mental health destroyed his life. His life became very erratic. Found cannabis. How many times have we heard this story?
Over and over
again. He found cannabis. Cannabis became a friend. Some moral versus legal choices had to be made. Ultimately, when you're involved with moral stories versus legal stories, the law usually wins. Got busted
every time,
right? I fought the law, right? And I want to get into that a little later as part of the summation of the story. But so we got a guy that's self-medicating. I think the documentation he's presented to us is compelling, right? But now we don't have the college's perspective of this. We can only surmise what the college has done, or what they did for him or not for him. And I guess, as I know, I talked to you about this. I really debated about calling the college and asking for their side of the story, right? First thing, they probably wouldn't talk to me either anyways, because it's a confidentiality issue. But then I also wanted to understand, I'm not a journalist, right? We have journalists working for us. We have 2 professional media professionals, both radio and written journalism, working for us. I went to them. I asked them, how should I approach this story? And they reminded me that this is one man's story.
Yeah.
So we're presenting one man's story. If the college, and we can only hope the college listens to ReeferMEDness, the podcast, we can only hope the professionals are out there listening to us. If the college wants to discuss this with us, I think it's great. But
we welcome them.
We know that in the health professions, and it's almost stereotypical, we see it on soap operas all the time. We work in a stressful career. Nurses, pharmacists, I guess you guys are a little bit, but nurses are on.
Yeah.
You guys are a little bit behind the lines supplying us, right? Moral injury versus burnout. right? Compassion fatigue versus PTSD. Working in environments where paperwork becomes more important than patient care. We work in stressful jobs. It's almost expected that health professionals, nurses, doctors will have some form of substance abuse. Alcohol is considered, students, it's back in the day, nursing students, boy, we had some great parties. But how many times have I met a nurse and we've talked about, after coming from the north, what's the first thing they're going to do when they're in the airport, right? They're getting a drink, right? It's accepted. I also was reading papers about how we as a profession view others who have substance abuse issues. And I use the word other, Trevor, because we do view them as others. If we have a colleague that is having a substance abuse issue, we see them as having a quiet issue by themselves. Please don't discuss it. And heavens forbid if you discuss it and now we're talking about treatment. Well, obviously you can't cope. So we eat our young. We're not fair to ourselves. Compassion fatigue. So here we got a guy that has mental health issues working in palliative care. God bless the man.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And let's. I'm going to stop you right there.
Please,
I know you know what palliative care is, but just give the people a quick summary. What does palliative care mean, Kirk?
Helping people die gracefully. Being in a hospital environment away from your loved ones and helping people, easing people to the next life, however you view death. That's his job, right?
So literally his job is being surrounded by death. Trying to make it as good as possible, but that is the point of his job.
Yeah. Paul was explaining to me at one point way back, he didn't tell this anecdote in this story, but part of our responsibility when we do Con Ed with our college is that we have to ask our patients, our clients for feedback on us. So I ask 5 professionals to give me biased feedback. That goes to the college. I ask 5 clients. How do you ask for feedback in that environment? So
you would literally have to ask the family, right? Because the client's not there anymore.
Yeah. So anyways, from what he tells us, he has a compelling. He's an appreciated nurse, right? So he's got mental health issues already identified. He's working in a stressful environment. Cannabis helps him. And I can't help but wonder if my college is a little naive. And this goes back to how you started with your anecdote, how you started. I can't help but think if our college is not a little naive and is still viewing cannabis as a controlled substance. It's no longer on the controlled substance manifest legislation, right? It's been removed from it. It's now considered either medicine or recreational. And we've talked about this before, how we believe even recreational users of cannabis are self-medicating, as nurses do when they go to the Air Canada lounge at the airport and have a glass of wine after a 2-week stint up north. So alcohol, substances are used. Trevor, I was even thinking down to how there are processes built in because of our substance abuse history as health professionals. And you'll know this. It's called the narcotic count.
Yeah. We live and die by that.
How often do you do it? A narcotic count?
We do one weekly. If I'm remembering, and yes, college, you can knock me down for this. I think it's required monthly, but frankly, we're a very high volume store, so we do one weekly.
See, we do one between shifts.
Yes, I know. When I was the poor people at the public personal care home, so I used to work for personal care homes, but yeah, they I think when we looked into it, they were required to do it daily, but they decided to bump it up to between shifts, so that can be 2 to 3 counts per day, just to make sure none of you evil nurses were sneaking a couple of those narcs.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another thing into you though. Just a couple of summers ago, pre-COVID, a buddy from university, from residence, was having a 50th birthday party. A bunch of us met in Winnipeg. We went on another we went on a beer crawl. It was very nice. And saw a bunch of, but the important bit was I was chatting with a girl, lady, woman who I went to school with. She's now an occupational therapist. And we were chatting about this, that, and the other thing. And she asked me if I ever wore a leg bag at work. I said, a what now? You know, a leg bag. You mean to pee into? She said, yeah. No, why? Because she rehabilitates people after something or other to help them get back into work. And she has had more than a couple pharmacists who they weren't their store policy was you had to have a pharmacist on the floor at all times, and you had to do a narc count whenever a pharmacist changed. So literally, rather than, and when they were the only pharmacist there, rather than take a bathroom break and have to come back and count all the narcs in their safe, they found it just easier to wear a leg bag. There's something wrong when that is a thing.
You know, healthcare, this isn't a podcast about healthcare, but it's a damaged industry in so many ways, how we are treated and the expectations placed on us. So, you know, so when I hear this story about losing a nurse in a field that is so special in the sense of palliative care, it just makes me shake my head. And I'm hoping, the interesting thing in the interview, I asked Paul that, you know, he's got 4 years to work on this, because one of the stipulations of remaining registered is that I must work full-time hours in a period of 5 years.
Okay.
So I can take a sabbatical, a hiatus, or I can work part-time as long as in 5 years I've worked a full-time shift. That, you know, and I think that's 2,000 hours or whatever, 2,018 hours, whatever 8 hours times 4
it's about 2,000.
Yeah. So you have to work that many hours in 5 years. So Paul still has time, and my profession, my college has time to go back and maybe review this with a different stigma, because that's the word I was searching for.
Oh yeah,
stigma.
Like one of the parts I really liked from when he talked. Now, again, we're not lawyers, we don't have access to all the info, but I really liked how him and his lawyer looked back through the previous cases and found one very similar to his, you know, a nurse who didn't have any work experience, got raided, ended up in front of the college, and basically said, I'm very, very sorry, I'll never touch cannabis again, and got a slap on the wrist. You know, it sounded like the facts of the case, again, I'm not a lawyer, but the facts of the case sounded very similar to Paul's, apart from that Paul has lots of experience, lots of accommodations from work, seems to be really good at his job, but said, no, I'm not going to stop cannabis because I think it's good for my mental health. Like, that seems to be the key, the stigma, really.
Well, two things happened, right? First of all, he demonstrated that cannabis is his medicine. So he got that through. So he went through that process, that punitive, and they allowed him that. But he gets the criminal record. I never asked him if it was summary or not, what kind of a conviction he got, but essentially I'm sure he got a criminal record for growing his medicine, and he explains that. And again, Trevor, like I said, I think it's compelling that that his story is compelling. In Manitoba in 2015, where are you going to get a green card, right? But the fact is, now he's got a criminal record. So my question is, I wonder if they maybe made a decision by policy, right? So the policy says, you got a criminal record, these are the things we have to do. Okay, but are we not looking at the individual case there? The guy was growing his medicine, he got busted, he made a moral decision, he lost the law. So why are we putting him through this? And colleges aren't very easy to deal with. A probation officer is supposed to call? Where's the empathy in that? The whole point of being a nurse is to have empathy and understanding. So the college isn't demonstrating empathy and understanding.
Well, let's go back to the whole point of both of our professions is to treat sick people or people with conditions. Yeah. He's got a condition.
Treating it with cannabis.
Yeah, and treating it with a now legal substance. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be caveats, and I'm not saying, just like somebody who is using a benzo for their anxiety shouldn't show up at work so stoned that they can't see, you probably shouldn't show up so stoned on cannabis you can't function. But, we, like you have said many times, I'm sounding way too much like you lately. As you have said many times, it is everybody is fine if you take 6 grams of lorazepam a day because, you're treating your anxiety. Yeah. Not that makes it good, or we'll throw your favorite. Everyone's fine if I come to work strung out on my gabapentin. Yeah. Because that's again, I'm not saying there shouldn't be stipulations there. I'm not saying, the whatever they called it originally, the return to work or make sure he's still fit for work, that's probably reasonable. Yeah. But that doesn't seem to be what they're actually interested in.
No, one of the things that I find everything's confrontational. All relationships that we deal with outside of our patient care model is confrontational. I mean, unions and employers, the whole language. I used to teach a human resource program at the local college. I was involved with teaching HR management courses. And when I did the union course, I was fascinated by the wordage and the rhetoric. It's all confrontational. Everything's confrontational. Us versus them. When you look at health regions forming and regions are now fighting against each other. Who gets the CAT scan? Everything's confrontation. So as nurses, we waddle through that and we just want to focus on the bloody patient. So anyways, I think we could bash this one around forever. I would like to hear more from my college. I recognize that in my profession, substance abuse is an issue. No question, man. No question about it. Substance abuse is an issue in my profession. I've met some highly functional alcoholics. And off we go. And I think I got so many antidotes on that, but that's not for this podcast. But here we've done, and I'm sad to say that my profession has lost a nurse, and I don't like how it happened to him. I'd love to hear the other side of the story. I open it up to the college to get back to us.
And I think that's as good a place to wrap as any. So, Kirk, because I think we forgot to mention again, I think you're Kirk Nyquist, the nurse.
I'm the nurse, and you are Trevor Schufelt, the pharmacist. The ever-changing pharmacist, eh?
Something like that, yeah.
So we're ReeferMEDness.
We're ReeferMEDness. We're a podcast.
Yeah, listen to our podcast. We explore issues around reefer madness, reefer medicine, and reefer mellow. And I think this one maybe falls under reefer medicine going mad.
I think, and this is a long version of what we like to call a My Cannabis story. So if you've had any good, bad, and different stories that have to do with cannabis was great in your life, cannabis was terrible in your life, maybe you are an accountant or something else where cannabis didn't go really well with your professional body. We want to hear that much. Record about a minute or two on your voice memo on your phone and email it to us. If it is a professional thing that you want to be anonymous, we're fine with that. We're fine with anonymous stories, but people love to hear stories about how cannabis affected people's lives, and we love hearing them and we love sharing them. Please email it to us at ReeferMEDness@gmail.com.
So people stay tuned.